Cool. And if you're willing, this is not a formal request. This is just me saying something. I love to see you guys. And sometimes lately I've noticed that it gets down to like only 3 or 4 people that stay in the camera, which is fine. You're totally welcome to do that. I don't judge you at all for it. I totally get it. Because I would do the same. I could eat my nachos and sip my coffee at will, nobody's watching. But if it doesn't bother you to stay on, it's meaningful to me just to kind of see your face and to just, I don't know, it just makes me happy somehow. Anyway, all right. So we get to start with a beautiful sentence tonight from Shree Ramakrishna. These are the things I count on. I mean, I really count on these things. I don't know why, but I sort of feel like a Girish Ghosh character in a way. Like there's any promises of grace, I collect them, and I store them in my mind. And I just go through all the people who have told me I'm covered by grace, when I sit down to do my practice, just like, okay, well, Thakur said so, Ma said so, Jesus said so. Okay, that's a pretty good collection. Buddha has said so. All right. But the sentence is from Ramakrishna. He says, one need not have any fear if one takes refuge in God. God protects his devotee. So that's your promise, and this I think is strongest when, you feel yourself heading down a wrong trail, or you feel your mind is moving in a direction you're not real happy about, but you've maybe just are not, don't have a good strength in that direction, or or the dam in that direction has completely been washed away, and you're very susceptible. The beloved understands and knows this condition. And if you call out, if you can muster even 1% of sincerity in that call, even just calling out, you'll find some relief from the beloved. At least, he'll fill the heart or give you a touch in the heart, so that if you continue to choose to call out, that will get stronger and stronger. If not that time, in time, it does grow stronger and stronger. And our faith in that grows stronger and stronger, so that when we do have a difficult time, or when we are unsuccessful in our self-control or whatever, that it doesn't have to tumble into a big, 4-day event of depression, or, fear of meditating, or, shame in the divine, that you don't have to go through that kind of turmoil. That you do have this, I like to call it, this coat of many colors that Joseph had in the Old Testament. It has nothing to do with what I'm using it for, but I always like to envision that when I go in the shrine, when I put my chadar on, that's my chadar of grace. And, that I can sit in front of the beloved and not have to sit there and work through all the things I've done wrong and all the things I've done right. And am I naughty or nice? And all of that. So just to hold on and really take a deep faith in these promises, because for us as bhaktas, we don't earn the right to our liberation. Some of the paths, like the path of jnana, they don't earn it either necessarily, but that's the focus. That you really have to have a clear mind. You really do have to have yourself under control. All of the yamas and niyamas are vital and absolute for that path. Otherwise, there's just no way to still the mind to see the reality in that way. It's why Ramakrishna says the path of devotion is the fastest these days, because the stomach is king. Our appetites are king in this age, this era. And so the only way that you can get free from your mind, from your karma, from the judgment of your own mind, Holy Mother says the grace of God is easily attained, but the grace of one's own mind is difficult indeed. And so the way that we deal with that is by remembering these, and taking refuge in the fact that the beloved has said, no, I've got you covered. Come, use that freedom to come toward me. Use that freedom to do your practice and to move forward without any fear. And so to hold on to these things, it's very important in practice, because for the bhakta, this is how the mind quiets. This is how the mind stops its judgment and stops its resistance. prevents you from being able to calm yourself inside and to accept the presence, right? Because there's always that idea, oh, I don't deserve this. Oh, God, I don't want God to see that. Those kinds of ideas. So Hari says, well, why does it take many people such a long time to realize him? The master, well, the truth is that man doesn't really feel restless for God unless he is finished with his enjoyments and his duties. The physician says, referring to the patient, oh, let a few days pass first, and then a little medicine will do him good. Right? So we have to work through these things, this life of ours, by discerning, right? And so there's a couple of things that help us work through it. One is the grace. Absolutely, we draw near to God. One is our japam, repeating the names of God. Mother says that every time that you repeat the name of God, your karma affects you a little less. The example she says, it may be that you were destined to be run through with a sword, but because of your devotion to your practice, you just get a prick on your finger with a needle, and that karma is finished. And so we hold on to our practice. We hold on to the idea of grace, and just sitting in the presence. Narada said, yes.
Yeah, regardless with that, I feel very grateful that I have this belief or I feel this grace inside me and in
Yeah.
my life. But for example, today I'm working as a therapist as well sometimes, and I have a client or a person that I work with, but she in one of the narratives it was like she's mad at source or at God. So how can she feel like, and she is dwelling with a lot of fears, a lot of fear of death, a fear of, because many things have happened into her life. So she has this like this I don't know how to say it, this wall or this block. So it's like yeah, that can be, hard. I didn't know what to say in the moment, but of course then, like, exploring a little bit, it came out like it's about trusting. It's about, yeah, opening up also for herself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true. There's several things that can be said from several directions in that situation. One, it's important to know that what we put in our mind and the narratives that we adopt for ourselves are the narratives we have to live. And so this is a big part of purifying the mind. This is a lot of the reason that we sing the names and the glories of God, because that fills our mind with the names and the glories of God. And those things that we're habitually thinking about, those are our responsibility. So if we're regularly chanting the names of God, or thinking of grace, or reading the lives of the great saints, or reading the poetry of great devotees, uh, and or praying in our mind in our idle time for the betterment of the people we're noticing around us. If we train our mind and make it habitual to think positively, and to remember beautiful things, then that colors our life. Ramakrishna says the mind is like a white sheet. It will take the color of what you dip it into. And when he says dip it into, he means what comes in through your senses. If you sit there, and I've learned this personally, if you sit there and read just a little bit too much news these days, you're going to create a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration inside, a sense of powerlessness will come into you. But if you don't spend your time, you just inform yourself just enough to know what's going on in a general way, and then bring yourself back to your local, your moment, that the I am right now, and don't bring in the not here, not now. That also generates more peace, that inner silence, developing that. So it's a matter of knowing that the things that are in your mind are not absolute, that they're changeable, and you can change your mind. And the thing about that is that we live in a mind. We don't live in a world. And so if you want to change the world, change your mind, change your view of others. So that's there. The other is that there are people, we have some accounts in the scriptures of people who came to realization by being angry at God. because that anger
Mhm.
caused them to think of God all the time. And that's all God cares about. He says, the thought of me, no matter how you're thinking of me, is purifying,
Mhm.
right? And so there is that element, although that's a very unhappy way to get there, unnecessarily unhappy. Um, but that also is a reality. So it's the thought of God, no matter how you think of him, whether you're angry, whether you're furious, whether you just whatever, whatever it is, lethargic. That thought of God by itself, every time it's uttered, indicates the reality and makes you aware of presence. And so, I don't know if any of that's helpful,
Thank you. Yeah,
really.
that's more helpful.
So, Narada said to Rama, Rama, you are passing your time in Ayodhya. How will Ravana be killed? You have taken this human body for that purpose alone. Rama replied, Narada, let the right time come. Let Ravana's past action begin to bear fruit. Then everything will be ready for his death. And so that's part of it. We have to let things come when they come. This is a tough teaching because you don't want this teaching to allow you to become carefree about doing your practice or about, disciplining yourself like that. And at the same time, you don't want to overemphasize those things either because things come in their time. So you do your practice, you work hard, you long for God, and you keep going, but you do it with patience and you do it for its own sake. You learn to enjoy the presence of God as God allows it for you at this moment, right? And really, that's directly proportionate to your faith and grace. If you can sit there and believe that God wants to be with you and that God desires company with you, if you can believe that He's willing to overlook everything that you hate about yourself, or that you're upset about yourself or insecure about yourself, if you can have that grace, if you can accept that grace and to sit in that presence, uh, the beloved is yours even now. Realization will come. Realization will come when it comes. But it's not the point. We don't have a point. Our point is that we can already enjoy God now. We can already enjoy the presence now. And when we sit for meditation, that's really what we're doing. We're opening ourselves up to an acceptance of grace to enjoy the presence of God, which manifests as an inherent bliss within us and a knowing of what is right and what is necessary and how to be in that moment. Hari, why is there so much suffering in this world? So they're going for the big questions, one right after another here. The master, this world is the Leela of God, the play of God. It is like a game. In this game, there's joy and sorrow, virtue and vice, knowledge and ignorance, good and evil. The game cannot continue if sin and suffering are altogether eliminated from the creation. This wonderful idea of this world as a game, in one sense, it's infuriating, because there's a place where I don't think it's going to be here, but there's a place where one of the devotees responds, "Oh yes, but her play is our death." Like that's great that she's having all this fun, but we're all suffering for it. And Ramakrishna, it says, that he smiles and he looks directly at the devotee, and he says, "Ah, but who are you?" Meaning that you are indeed mother who has come into her own game to play. So nobody is suffering but the divine mother, as she has become all of us and she has forgotten that she was herself. And so she has taken your name and she's taken your story and your body and your mind and has decided to call herself Swami C or call herself Anna or Nick, for the time being, until she remembers again. Oh gosh, I was never, I was never that guy, Swami C. I've always been myself. And she drops the body and goes back to freedom, as it were. So this world is the play of God, and it's a game, and it's got all of this going on, and it's because of all of these seeming realities, right? None of which are real. All of them require a particular. a particular perspective to exist. Good and evil can't exist unless you can't see both sides of the coin at the same time, right? Once you're able to see both sides of the coin, which means you don't have a particular perspective, you've got a universal perspective, a big perspective. And in that big perspective, these things begin to make sense. And this is why we try and break down egoism, because egoism is the trap of a singular perspective that becomes more and more particular as the ego grows. In the game of hide and seek, one must touch the granny in order to be free. But the granny is never pleased if she is touched at the very beginning. It is God's wish that this play should continue for some time. Then, out of 100,000 kites, at best, one or two break free. Right? He's talking about the game of kites, which I never knew this, but apparently there's a game of kites where you put sawdust or glass dust on your string, and the goal of playing kites is a bunch of people are flying kites out there, and you try and use your strings to cut each other's kite lines. And so the last person left with a kite is, well, the winner in that game. And this one, he's the loser because, here he's telling us that really in our practice, in this game of Maya, this game of life, only one out of 100,000 kites at best, one or two are going to break free. And you laugh and clap your hands, oh mother, watching them, right? So that's why you have to just be patient, enjoy the game of kites, right? Don't play it in order to win necessarily in that sense. Play it with patience and with skill and with calmness, but enjoy the process. In the path of bhakti yoga, the path and the goal are the same. The path is love and the goal is love. So there's nothing to acquire. There's just something to accept. And that is always present and always available to you, to the degree that you allow yourself to hold on to it and to trust it. Right? Oh, it is here where he says this. So one of 100,000 kites at best, one or two break free, and you dost laugh and clap your hands, O mother, watching them. In other words, after the practice of hard spiritual discipline, one or two have the vision of God through his grace and are liberated. Then the Divine Mother claps her hands in joy and exclaims, bravo, there they go. Hari, but this play of God is our death, right? Good Lord, I'm glad she's having a good time, but I'm not. I want out of here. The master smiling. Please, tell me who you are. God alone has become all of this Maya, this universe, the living beings, the 24 cosmic principles. As the snake I bite, and as the charmer I cure. It is God himself who has become both Vidya and Avidya, light and darkness, good and evil. He remains deluded by Maya avidya, ignorance. Again, with the help of the Guru, he is cured by the Maya of Vidya, or of knowledge. All right, so in this universe, this is the yamas and niyamas. There's things that take you deeper into being a body-mind, right? Those things in your life that make you think of your body or require your body to enjoy, that's what gets us stuck here, right? And that's why there's these rules, or these, we call them rules and we treat them like rules, but really they're guidelines. They're helpful information, so that we don't have to. It really bothered me, I guess, because I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian household. This idea of right and wrong all the time always bothered me. And St. Paul says something very, very beautiful, actually, in one of his letters. He said, all things are lawful, right? Everything is allowed in Maya. Everything is allowed, but not all things are helpful, right? That's what he says. And so in spiritual life, everything's fine. Yeah, you can do whatever you want, absolutely. But discern, because a lot of the things you want to do, or that the mind and body wants to do, are not helpful for the freedom of the self, for being able to let go and to know that you are not the body and that you are not the mind. So if all of your hobbies and all of your pleasures require the body and its senses, or require the mind and its machinations, those things are causing an attachment. and they're going to hold you. They're not going to let you break free because you believe yourself to be them. And you've grown attached because your pleasures and your joys come from them. And so that makes it more difficult to let go of them when the time comes. So this is the situation that we're in, right? Master says, please tell me who you are. God alone has become all of this Maya, the universe, living beings, the 24 cosmic principles. As the snake I bite and as the charmer I cure. It is God himself who has become both Vidya and Avidya. He remains deluded by the Maya of Avidya, ignorance, and again, with the help of the Guru, he is cured by the Maya of Vidya, knowledge. Ignorance, knowledge, and perfect wisdom. The Jnani sees that God alone exists and is the doer, that he creates, he preserves, and destroys. The Vijnani sees that it is God who has become all of this, right? And that's that, all of that dream stuff that I like to talk about is really, for me, the best way to kind of understand how God can be everything and yet look like multiplicity, right? I learned that from the dream. In the dream, your singularity, the single mind, can present all of the elements to you in all of their forms to you and be convincing as close as you want to look at them. They'll increase with resolution the closer you look. So this mind stuff, this Brahman, this substance, all of which is illegal because we can't say anything like that about Brahman, but for a purpose, for putting an understanding on it, or working for a working ideal. That's what Prabhupada used to call it, a working ideal. We look at Brahman and we can say he has become all of these things. Brahman is mind stuff. He's the stuff from which dreams are made, literally. And the Vijnani, the real seer, the awakened seer, sees that God has become all of this. Vivekananda had that experience, right, where he saw that God had in fact become the coffee cup that he used to ridicule Ramakrishna about. Oh, you're saying that God is a coffee cup. Is that what you're saying? And Maharaj would just kind of smile and say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And one time he gets to see it. And then he was walking down the street and he couldn't believe that things were real. He was seeing divinity everywhere. And he says that he started banging his head on the metal fence posts to convince himself that they existed, that the world existed as a material thing. After attaining Mahabhava and prema, that means pure love, where you love God for God's own sake, and it's a very, very high, pure, good, let's use a good California word, high vibrational love, a very pure love that doesn't have a motive. After attaining that kind of love, one realizes that nothing exists but God. Bhakti pales before bhava, right? So bhakti is just that regular devotion where you're just enjoying God, but bhava is an absorption in that knowledge, an absorption in that love, where the boundaries between you and your lover begin to break down a bit, right? So this regular love that we have, he says, boy, once you get a taste of that bhava, you're going to see there's a big difference between devotion and bhava. Bhava ripens into mahabhava and prema. That's that love for love's own sake. No motive whatsoever. To Banerjee, do you still hear that gong-like sound at the time of meditation? Banerjee, yes, sir, every day. Besides, I have visions of God's form. Do such things stop after the mind has once experienced them? Master, true. Once the wood catches fire, it cannot be put out. To the devotees, he knows many things about faith. Wow. Yeah. Banerjee, I have too much faith. Master, bring the women of your family with those of Balaram's. Banerjee, well, who is Balaram? Master, you don't know Balaram? He lives in Bospara. Shree Ramakrishna loved guileless people. Narendra Banerjee was absolutely guileless. The master loved Niranjan because he too was without guile. What is that guilelessness? It's that just openness. somebody who's gullible. That's a word that comes up from guile. Gullible. So you're a very trusting person, a very open person, you're like a child. If you That's probably one of my big weaknesses when I'm around kids. I love to make up stories. you know, I love to tell them about the people behind the light switch, or the people holding up the floor. And the children, there's like, oh my gosh, really? That's guilelessness, just that open sweetness, a natural trusting of the world and the people around you. And Sri Ramakrishna loved guileless people. Master to M, why do I ask you to see Niranjan? It is to find out that if he is truly guileless. All right. Sunday, May 25th, 1884. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the cement platform that encircled the trunk of the old banyan tree in the Panchavati. Vijay, Surendra, Bhavanat, Rakal, and other devotees were present. A few of them sitting with the master on the platform, the rest were on the ground below. The devotees had thought of celebrating the master's birthday, which had to be put off because of his illness. Since Sri Ramakrishna now felt much better, the devotees wanted to have the celebration that day. A woman musician, a famous singer of kirtan, was going to entertain them with devotional songs. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. M had been looking for Sri Ramakrishna in the master's room. When he did not find him there, he went to the Panchavati and eagerly asked the devotees, where is he? He was standing right in front of the master, but in his excitement, he didn't even notice him. The devotees laughed loudly. A moment later, M saw Ramakrishna and felt very much embarrassed. He prostrated himself before the master, who sat there facing the south and smiling happily. Kedar and Vijay were sitting at his left. These two devotees had had a misunderstanding recently when Kedar had cut off his connection with the Brahmo Samaj. The master to M with a smile, you see how I've united them. The master had brought a Madhavi creeper from Vrindavan in the year 1868 and had planted it in the Panchavati. The creeper had grown big and strong. Some children were jumping and swinging from it. The master observed them and laughed. He said, they're like young monkeys. They will not give up swinging, even though they sometimes fall to the ground. Noticing that Surendra was standing before him, the master said to him affectionately, come up and sit with us on the platform. Then you can dangle your feet comfortably. Surendra went up and took his seat. Bhavanat had his coat on, and Surendra said to him, are you going to England? I like these little tidbits. There's not a whole lot of stuff in there to learn, but you see the humanity of these folks. They're hanging together just like we're hanging together. And who knows? We could have been sitting there. This could have been us at that one time. I've told you about that thing that Swami Prabhupada said to me that really played with my head. Because I was a brand new monk, and he asked, I had been reading the Gospels, telling him about it at lunch. And he asked me, have you seen yourself? Have you found yourself in there? I've already told the story, but I was confused. I was like, what are you talking about? Find myself in there. And he says, well, think about it. You show up and knock on our door out of nowhere. We'd never seen you before. We didn't know who you were. When I asked you what you wanted, you said you wanted to join the monastery. He says, do you think that's natural? Do you think that's normal? He says, surely you must have been familiar with these things. Something has drawn you here. And so it really changed the way that I studied scripture. I really learned to place myself in that scripture, to experience that scripture, to listen to it as it was actually talking to me and actually teaching me. And the fun of kind of looking through the gospel and trying to find, by kind of feeling that resonance, was I that person? Was I that person? Was I that person? And you start noticing all these people in the background that are, that aren't big candidates or don't say anything, don't have lines in the play, but they're there, and you start thinking, oh, there I am. All right, so they're all messing around, sitting, having a nice conversation. Surendra has just asked, M if he's going to England because he has his coat on, or Surendra. No, wait. Oh, Bhavanat had his coat on. Okay. And Surendra's making fun of him. Are you going to England? Master smiling. God is our England. Now and then I used to leave off my clothes and joyfully roam about naked. Once Sambhu said to me, "It is very comfortable to walk about naked. That is why you do it. Once I did it myself." That's a different conversation. I haven't heard any devotees say that. Surendra. On returning from the office, as I put away my coat and trousers, I say to the Divine Mother, "Oh, Mother, how tightly you have bound me to this world," right? These clothes, just, oh, it's tight. You bound me to this world, right? That's a wonderful thing, because then as you're changing from work, you can see that you're taking off your bondage, being free. Master, there are 8 fetters which man is bound. Shame, right? That's one of the fetters. The fetters are the things that actually clamp you down. So your shame is a fetter. That's the thing that prevents you from running to the beloved. Hatred, right, which is the other side of love. So if you love something more than other things, then that means you hate some things and you love some things. And so the more intense that you express your love for particulars, that's what egoism does to us. It makes us love some things more than other things. So hatred is the shadow of love. Fear is one of these, right? Because fear comes from believing in our smallness, believing in our separation from the whole, believing that God is other. We saw that in the story of Eden. Right after they eat that fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the very first thing they felt was fear. And they ran and hid themselves from God when they heard him walking in the garden. Pride of caste, right? Pride of our family position. Of course, as Americans, this has it still exists more on the East Coast, believe it or not, and sometimes in the South too. People can have this family pride. You know, if their family's been there a long time, or if their family's been wealthy, or they're well positioned in society, we hold on to that. We identify ourselves with that. Pride of caste, hesitation, right? Not being sure to take that step, not being bold, being kind of mealy mouthed about our spirituality, about running to the divine. The desire to conceal, right? Sneaky things, always sneaking around in the background. And, you know, oddly enough, this is something I kind of found in myself. And to the point I kind of wondered where that came from, because I sometimes find myself sneaking around with things that don't need to be snuck around with. So sneaking, this desire to conceal, and so forth. Ramakrishna is saying, "Mother, this is the grief that sorely grieves my heart, that even with you for a mother, and though I am wide awake, there should be robbery in my house." Right? That even though we're sitting here with mother, and even though we may be wide awake, very aware, still we get charmed by these things in Maya. They catch our eye, and we think about them a little bit more, and then memories come up, and then an expectation of their pleasure comes up, and we get ourselves trapped. And you know, he's saying, this is the grief that sorely grieves my heart. You know, that I'm bound to this world, and I'm bound to my attachments, and I behave in ways that rob me of my bliss, that make me unaware of my inner wisdom, make me unaware of my inner immortality and freedom. You know, that there should be this robbery in my house. He continues, "In the world's busy marketplace, O Shyama, you are flying kites. High up in the air, high up they soar on the wind of hope, held fast by Maya's string." Right? So all of us are reaching, we're all there, soaring high on the wind of hope. You know, oh, I hope, I hope I realize God. I hope I can be free. Their frames are human skeletons. Their sails of the 3 gunas made, right? Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas are the things that are kind of determining how we flow in the wind, whether we're vibrating in craziness all over the place, or whether we're kind of holding pretty steady because we're balanced, you know, or whether we're just completely losing our bearing and just circling. I've seen kites do all of those things based on their tails. So our tail is the 3 gunas. But all their curious workmanship is merely for ornament. Upon the kite strings you have rubbed the manja paste of worldliness, so as to make each straining strand all the more sharp and strong. Out of 100,000 kites, at best, one or two break free, and you laugh and clap your hands, O mother, watching them. On favoring winds, says Ram Prasad, the kites set loose will speedily be borne away to the infinite, across the sea of the world. Right? So those of us that can break our strings of worldliness, the strings that tie us to the ideas of body mind and put us in service to the body mind, we break those. And when we do, we speedily are borne away to the infinite, across the sea of this world, the sea of Maya, right? Master, Maya's string means wife and children, the things that we're attached to, the things that hold us down and define us in this world. You know, it's one of the things. That's why in the monastery it's kind of interesting in that experience being in the monastery, because you don't have the markers of life. You know, it's like you don't get married, and then you don't have a kid, and then your kid doesn't, you know, grow up and go to college, and then your kids don't have grandchildren. All these stages of growing up. It's like in the monastery, I found it's very monolithic in that sense. Just every day is very much the same. And the way that the first time I thought about this was in San Francisco. I was in the same building for the first time in my life for 15 years straight. I had never lived in a building more than 2 years in all my life until I moved into the monastery. And I was in that building for 15 years. And I would look out the front window, and right across the street was this young boy. And, you know, when I moved into that monastery, he was like 4 years old, 5 years old. And I watched him, and I didn't see him often. You know, it would just be the time when I happened to be looking out the window and he happened to be doing something out front. And I remember he's 4 or 5 years old. And then I saw him one day, and he was running a lemonade stand at the corner of the street. And then I saw him selling something on one of the days when they were doing a triathlon or something on the street there. And he was a little bit older. And then I saw him come out one day with his dad and get into the sports car and for driving lessons for the first time. So I saw him learning to drive with his dad. And then I saw him one time pull up with a friend in the car, right? And then I saw him packing up his stuff and leaving for college. And that's when I had that thought. I was like, wow, look at that. I've just been standing unchanged, really. That's how it felt in this window, and have watched this life happen, you know, in these little vignettes. And then the final time I saw him, oddly enough, now I have to confess a little bit of one of my faults. I snuck out and had a cup of coffee down at a little cafe on Union Street. And he was sitting in that cafe with a friend and two guys dressed in suits. And it turns out that his father, for his graduation from college, had bought him a restaurant to run and to create. And the two men in the ties they were talking about what kind of atmosphere, what kind of menu items, what were they, how they were coming up with all their ideas. And that was the last time I ever saw him, was that. So I got to see a full life cycle there in a very interesting kind of way. And so, yes, these are the strings that tie us to this world. You know, these things that kind of mark us as we go along, these stories of life, these narratives that we adopt for ourselves, and the people that we attach to, and the stories of those lives that we attach to. Right? So Maya's string means these wife and these children and all that comes along with that. Upon the kite strings you have rubbed the manja paste of worldliness. Worldliness means lust and greed. Right? So lust and greed are the fundamental things that bind us to the body mind. Right? And that's why lust is such a destructive one, because the intensity of it means that you have to be super focused on being a body and being a particular type of body, you know. And then you see others according to that desire, according to your identification as male or female. Then you see others as male or female or whatever in between, right? And then people become good looking or not good looking because you've got lust, right? And then you begin noticing who's rich and who's poor, who's old and who's young. All of these things come just from the lust that we have in ourselves. And so you see how these avidya things, these things of darkness. The reason they call that way is because it forces you to see the world in multiplicity. It forces you to see the world of separateness, right? Instead of transcending lust and having no lust. So in a world of no lust, there is no need of good looking and ugly, no need for age, no need for wealth, unless greed comes in. So you see, lust and greed are the reason that the world is the way it is. It's the reason that you see it the way that you see it. And so this is why it's imperative that we break those bonds, that we focus every day in our practice with intensity and regularity and strength to remember we are not the body, we are not the mind, so that we can what? Learn to love with equanimity. That we love ugly people, we love beautiful people just the same. We don't even notice. We love men, we love women just the same. We don't even notice in that highest state.
Swami, I
Yeah.
noticed as I get older,
Uh-huh.
I value attractive and non-attractive people more equally.
Yes.
Is that just the wisdom of aging, or
Absolutely. Well, it's the wisdom of aging. It's also the grace of aging. To me, and I emphasize this, old age and the demise of the body are some of the most beautiful signs of grace that you can possibly have, because it's mother openly teaching you directly at that point in life, these things are fleeting. These things are not important. These things are not the one most important thing, right? And you start, and if you can use your inner wisdom and realize that one most important thing is the love that you have to share, because that love can be shared intensely, even if you're bedbound, even if you're stuck in a single room, when your grandkids come to see you or the neighbors come to see you. If you're a person of great love at that point, if you're a person who's sitting there in communion with your beloved in that condition, not worried about death, not worried about old age, not worried about the bodies and what you look like. But when you look at people with love, when they come in to visit you, that's going to be a blessing to you and to them. Because, I remember my Aunt Elsie, she was that. And when the older she got, the more she loved. And I remember her when she was just a withered, short, hobbling woman, and my fingers got closed in the car door. Everybody else was screaming like, "Oh my God!" And only Aunt Elsie just had the presence of mind to open the door so I could get my fingers out. And the first thing that she did, I remember she grabbed my hand and put them in between her fingers, and she was just kissing her hand while she was praying to God. Oh, please don't let it hurt too bad. Please don't let them be broken. Please let them be okay. That was the only time in my life somebody did something like that. And I think I was 7 years old at that time, and I remember it clear as day. Even now, I see her face, and I see her eyes, and I see my little hand in her hands as she prayed like that. That's old age. That is the beauty of a life well lived, where you know that love is the one most important thing. This body's going to go. That all your friends are going to die. All these wonderful things, and mother's showing them to you. That's old age. That's the grace of old age, because she's teaching you to detach and to start put your eyes on that which is not changing within yourself. Find that part of you that isn't old. Find that part of you that has never changed, right? And dwell there. So mother, that's definitely the result of old age. Lust starts to become secondary. Greed starts to be secondary. Why? Because you realize you're just going to be here for a few more days, and all the narratives of life start to become unimportant or lose their relative importance, right? And if you've got a notion of who you are, that's a great and beautiful grace. So use old age in a beautiful way. Use old age to allow you to pull the meat out of the nutshell, so you can find your freedom in those days. Very powerful times if you have discerning eyes. Yeah. All right. He says the three gunas, Rajas, Sattva, and Tamas. These are, Vivekananda actually talks about them sort of as elements. that all of this universe is composed of these three elements. And what's very interesting here is that there's a wonderful video that was passed to me, and I've passed it on to several people, about quantum physics. This quantum physicist from Britain, he has what we would call a spiritual experience, but he's a scientist, a hardcore scientist, so he doesn't at all talk about it in spiritual terms. He talks about it in quantum terms, and says that the nature of the universe is love, that he had this experience. He saw that the quantum field, that within this quantum field, each one of us is a quantum field in which we are both the observer, the actor, and the thing being experienced. We're both the observer and the object, that we're all of that. And he actually uses the word that we are that in his little exposition in there. And so in this world of quantum physics, there isn't reality. There's vibration, and there's different levels of vibration. And when you start thinking of the world in those terms, this idea of sattva, rajas, and tamas is much more understandable and much more believable. You know, sattva is when rajas and tamas are in balance. There's a harmony. They're both in proportion to each other. Rajas is when rajas is ahead and you're very vibratory. You're the person that can't sit still, you know, and if you've got a really bad, you're frenetic and ADHD, and you can't focus, and you're just all over the place. And tamas is the opposite. You're the person who can't stop playing video games and sitting there growing fat in your desk chair, or laying in bed staring at the ceiling, you know, unable to convince yourself to get up on time. So all three of those, and depending on which one is prevalent in you, that's the one that's binding you. And so we try and bring it to a balance of sattva, so that from there we can let go of both action and inertia and transcend. Right? He says the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, have men under their control. They are like three brothers. As long as sattva exists, it calls on rajas for help, and rajas can get help from tamas. The three gunas are so many robbers. Tamas kills, rajas binds. Sattva no doubt releases men from this bondage, but it cannot take him to God. Right? So it's not through an action that we know God. Right? It is by grace that we know. It's when God brings us to God. Nothing in the world, in the manifested world, can take us there. It can only point. Every experience of this world can point. Every action can point, but nothing can actually take us there but this grace of the beloved. Vijay, smiling. It is because sattva too is a robber, master. True. Sattva cannot take man to God, but it shows him the way. Bhavanat. These are wonderful words indeed. Master, yes, this is a lofty thought. Listening to these words of the Master, the devotees felt very happy. Master, lust and greed, woman and gold, this is the cause of bondage. Lust and greed alone constitutes samsara, the world. It is lust and greed that keeps one from seeing God, holding the towel in front of his face. Here we go. Holding the towel in front of his face. Do you see my face anymore? Of course not. The towel hides it. No sooner is the covering of lust and greed removed than one attains chidananka, consciousness and bliss. Here I am, consciousness and bliss. I don't have the right costume for that, but anyway. All right, so the corrupting influence of lust. Let me tell you something. He who has renounced the pleasure of wife has verily renounced the pleasure of the world. God is very near to such a person. Oh, wow. So this is why for monasticism we practice celibacy, and for householders we practice discipline, self-control. Right? So let me tell you something. He who has renounced the pleasure, we'll make it more equanimous. He who has renounced the pleasure of sex has verily renounced the pleasure of the world. God is very near to such a person. The devotees listen to these words in silence. Yes. Master, to Kedar and to Vijay and the other devotees. He who has renounced the pleasure of wife has verily renounced the pleasure of the world. It is lust and greed that hides God. You people have such imposing mustaches, and yet you too are involved in woman and gold. Tell me if it isn't true. Search your heart and answer me. Vijay, yes, it is true. Kedar remained silent. Master, I see that all are under the control of woman. He's talking to a group of men, so that's why he's hounding on you ladies right now. If you all were sitting there, he'd be hounding on the men. I see that all are under the control of woman. One day I went to Captain's house, and from there I was to go to Ram's house. So I said to Captain, please give me my carriage hire. He asked his wife about it. She too held back and said, what's the matter? What's the matter? At last, Captain said, Ram will take care of it. You see, the Gita, the Bhagavata, and the Vedanta all bow down before a woman. Everyone laughs. A man leaves his money, his property, and everything in the hands of his wife. But he says with affected simplicity, I have such a nature that I cannot keep even 2 rupees with me. he takes he takes credit for not having 2 rupees, but it's really because his wife won't give him 2 rupees. A man went to an office in search of a job. There were many vacancies, but the manager did not grant his request. A friend said to the applicant, appeal to Golapi and you will get the job. Golapi was the manager's mistress. Men do not realize how far they are dragged down by women. Now I'm getting nervous. Don't beat me. I'm the messenger. Men do not realize how far they are dragged down by women. Once I went to the fort in a carriage, feeling all the while that I was going along a level road. At last I found that we had gone 4 stories down. It was a sloping road. A man possessed by a ghost does not know he is under the ghost's control. He thinks he's quite normal. See, this is what he's pointing out here is not so much the woman and the ghost, obviously, but he's telling us this is the nature of the relative world you're in. And this is the reason that you have to keep your eyes on the absolute unchanging within, because that's the only indicator of whether you're going toward the beloved or away from the beloved. Because in this world, you can slowly move into the dark and not see the danger until you're caught. You know, when one becomes an alcoholic, you know, when one becomes a drug addict, it doesn't start that way, right? It starts with gradual stages, but you get yourself more and more entangled. And finally, when you realize it, it's too late. You're fully addicted, you know, and then the difficult part comes where you start paying for it, right? We lose our job, we lose our homes, we lose whatever to these diseases, to these addictions. And so he's telling us, he's like, be careful, this world is relative. Keep your eyes on God. The reason that we draw into our heart self, into the shrine of the heart there, is because from there we can stay aware, we can observe, and you can feel it in yourself. When you do something against your nature, something against love, something against wisdom, you know, something that doesn't allow you to stay present, know that that's taking you into dark and pull out of it. Because if you keep going into the dark, you'll stop feeling it. You'll stop noticing it, stop paying attention to it. And little by little, we get trapped. Vijay smiling. So Thakur just finished saying, a man possessed by a ghost doesn't know it. Vijay smiling. But he can be cured by an exorcist if he finds one. In answer to Vijay, Shree Ramakrishna only said, well, that depends on the will of God. Then he went on with his talk about women. All right, we're going to stop there.